Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Block Digest. We've got guest Johnathan Bertrand, founder of Decentral in Quebec here. And today we're going to dive a little bit in depth into the mining situation going on there with the moratorium and so forth, and the situation regarding Bitmain's establishment of a subsidiary up there. So, if you kind of want to introduce yourself a little bit, John, and kind of give a breakdown of what Decentral is.
Yeah, sure. So Decentral is basically, obviously it's a mining facility. So we have this mining operations that are going on. We're also doing a lot of research on mining. So for instance, you can see on my Twitter, I've sent recently the Bitcoin mining consumption index that I'm trying to actually achieve a better estimate of the mining consumption worldwide than the one that digital economists and the mainstream media use all the days. So I'm actually going to be working also with BitMEX research on some on this very matter, on this very subject. So doing a lot of research based on my own experience with Bitcoin mining. And lately, I've been a big warrior in the whole Hydro-Quebec situation. So as you've mentioned, there's a moratorium going on right now, and this moratorium is basically killing all the small and medium businesses that we have here in Quebec that are trying to launch and expand their mining operations. So mine since January of this year. So now it's 7 months that my projects have been like on hold. So I could not do any expansions. I'm stuck with the number of power I have right now, which is under a megawatt, unfortunately. And I'm ready to have more than a megawatt for a long now. But since Hydro-Quebec is doing a moratorium, we can do the expansions because the situation here in Quebec is very special. Hydro-Quebec, they have this monopoly over the energy distribution. So what this gives, what this does, is actually that even if the municipalities or even if there's private energy distributors or producers, they have to go through the Hydro-Quebec distribution process, and they've basically hijacked everything that is related to mining or what they say to blockchain and all that kind of space. They've all put it together in a box, and they're saying, okay, well, if you're a city and you want to sell your energy, if you're a private distributor and you want to sell your energy, you're going to have to put a dissuasive rate on the miners. So it's pretty funny to me because until February of this year, Hydro-Quebec had big marketing plans to attract all the data centers and miners here in Quebec. And at the same time, they say in their latest reports that they haven't tried to sell this energy to our business. So there's a lot of contradictions going on, and that is a thing that we kind of see a lot with monopolies. So from what I know, there's some clans inside Hydro-Quebec itself. Some people are for mining, and we've spoken to some of those people, and some others are against it. Now, I think the bigger picture is also that PLQ, which is the Liberal Party that is actually in power right now in Quebec, they are doing a lot of efforts in the last years to attract Chinese and a lot of Chinese investment, a lot of Asian, at least, investment in Quebec. And it seems to be very there seems to be some kind of link between the government, which is the PLQ, and Hydro-Quebec, which is basically a monopoly that is governed by the public, so by our government ultimately. It seems to be a bit fishy here, especially since they want to put a special block. So here in Quebec, the situation is we have 1,500 megawatts of surplus of energy. So we have all these dams that fill up with water, and we let water flow because we have too much water. So there's 1,500 megawatts of water of electricity that we don't use right now, but they want to give only a block of 500 megawatts to the mining industry. And funnily enough, at the same time, we hear rumors that Bitmain are buying 300 megawatts from Quebec pretty soon enough. And well, we can see on the 14th of June, Bitmain has opened an office here in Quebec. So there seems to be a lot going on, and it's a bit fishy to me. Yeah.
Okay, and so one thing to really clarify is like there was an initial moratorium instituted earlier this year that was then lifted, and they've since instituted a second one after an influx of proposals for new mining operations. Correct?
That is correct. And this moratorium, well, when they lift it, that's pretty funny because they actually lifted for only a day, and then they've put back the new moratorium that we're currently under right now. And well, tomorrow I'm going to be able to give you a lot more news about that because actually, Régie de l'Énergie, which is the organization that is overseeing Hydro-Quebec, so a public organization that oversees the other public organization, just to make sure that everything is super efficient. Well, anyways, Régie de l'Énergie is going to give their decision about the current emergency. And what I expect out of it is that they're going to put even more delays. But I hope at least they're going to remove the dissuasive rate, which is basically 15 cents in Canadian right now. Like, no business can be profitable at that rate right now, especially not with the market we're having right now. So, and maybe something else I can bring up. Hydro-Quebec mentioned that they received 18,000. Sorry, it's yeah, 18,000 megawatts of demand. But we know that the Bitcoin network in its whole right now, if it was using, and we know that the dominant miner obviously is the Antminer S line. If it was using only the S line, it would be around 4,000 megawatts right now. So we like those numbers are very disproportionate. They're used politically against us, and so yeah, that's basically my take on it right now.
Because you know it's I like in a little bit of the research I did to kind of prep for this, I saw Bitmain claim that the office and the subsidiary they've established was pretty much just for like equipment sales and retail
Mm.
support and so on.
Uh,
Um, is
Yeah,
there any like concrete basis as far as like lobbying or like power purchases that you've come across? Because some of the documents were in French, and you know, as an English speaker, it
yeah,
was kind of hard for me to
yeah.
parse through a lot of it.
You're actually correct. So the news outlet that came out about the Bitmain offices apparently would be for equipment sales. Although we like there is a lot of Bitmain people that got active in Montreal. So I wasn't to the zero conf. I think the Zcash conference that was going on in Montreal about 2 weeks ago, or yeah, 2 3 weeks ago. But there was a lot of Bitmain people involved. I've heard by very trusted sources. So I know like they're definitely in the space. They're definitely getting more and more involved. And like uh, we don't have. I can't say for sure that they are the one requesting 300 megawatts, but like it makes a lot of sense to me, obviously.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's you know part of my speculation as far as like looking at the mining ecosystem is like at least in terms of producers of equipment, I've always kind of suspected or thought it would be rational to kind of have a decent amount of surplus equipment that wasn't being operated because of like one the bottleneck of access to electricity, which isn't guaranteed to be in excess of production capacity, and then also the dynamic that like when you bring more hash rate online, you're effectively raising everybody's operating costs including yours, and so it might be rational to kind of not just literally operate everything that you're capable of producing. But you know, like you said, when I'm talking about the application report that Hydro-Quebec released, that kind of justify the reinstituting the moratorium, like that is just like insane from my perspective to believe that producers are literally sitting on that much idle hash rate. Like that would effectively be like the Bitcoin network is not secure right now. Like it could be 51% attacked at any time.
Correct. Based on those assumptions, my estimations, it would take actually 40 months to produce the gear that Hydro-Quebec says they have received as demand. So if we were to put this 18 megawatts, sorry, 18,000 megawatts online, that would take for Bitmain at the current pace that they're producing their hardware, and that is around 3,000 units, 3,000. Is it 300,000 units? Sorry. Um, per month. Okay, so that would take around 40 months to produce for Bitmain, which is the biggest manufacturer right now. This demand. So obviously, it makes no sense to me that like these demands are very inflated. I don't think Hydro Quebec has any anything to gain in trying to fake those numbers. So I really believe they've received those demands, but doing an online demand is so easy. Like I can go online, fill up a demand, say I need 300 megawatts. There's so many times that we've helped entrepreneurs that came to do a mining operation. They told us, oh yeah, we have 20 megawatt, 25 megawatt. We get on site, they have 1 megawatt. So there's a lot of like those numbers are very disproportionate, and people in this space tend to always do like those big demands because they expect they're gonna do this massive operation, and you just have to plug your unit and it all runs by itself. And so I think there's a lot of things that don't hold together in this report.
Hmm. So, because kind of looking at that, I'm sorry, just to, like I want to get like one more comment in before I like pass things off to Rick and Janine. But like because like looking at the situation of those applications from my perspective, like I feel inclined to like break it down into the different potential explanations for it. And like obviously like the first one is like your speculation that these were just completely fake applications to kind of trigger the reinstitution of the moratorium and allow Bitmain to kind of enter into negotiations without like power demand growing so that they would be able to get a bigger chunk of the pie. But also like the potential that maybe like big farms in China or entities like Bitmain might simply be trying to like put these requests in projecting future growth and kind of try to lock that down now so that like other operations aren't able to kind of come in and eat up the available power before they're able to like get their cut of the pie. But I mean like really like if your speculation is correct that like Bitmain is attempting to effectively do this to corner the power supply available. Like, no matter which way I really look at explaining those applications, I mean, I keep coming to the same conclusion that, like, we're looking at the dynamic in China where, like, initially a lot of Bitmain's growth was due to the fact that there was a rampant, like, occurrence of power theft, of like technically illegal deals made with
Mhm.
local provincial governments to access power they shouldn't be able to. And we've kind of seen since the exchange ban last year a big tightening in terms of the government trying to push people out. And like really no matter the specific explanation for that those applications, like I really can't not look at this as Bitmain attempting to just monopolize like the power supply in Quebec and try to maintain their position in terms of like mining operations and not just production. And like
Correct.
it really bothers me like thinking about the potential of like idle hash rate sitting around and really how much that could be.
Mm.
Because like I said, I've always assumed that producers were operating along that lines, but based on the power amounts in these applications, like I have never considered that like being a factor to that degree at all. And like I
Uh,
was just kind of wondering about like the attitude on the ground about like how viable the threat of a 51% attack actually being like maneuvered here with potential influence from the Chinese government.
Again, like the amount of surplus we have is actually 1,500 megawatts. So there's a lot of room, actually, even past the 500 megawatt block. And also another important feature, maybe to know about Quebecers politics, is that Hydro-Quebec actual like line of service is first come, first serve. So on that basis, like my demand that I did at the beginning of the year was ahead of Bitmain's. So based on those laws, based on our Quebec laws, that is first come first serve, I would be like the electricity would be provided to all those local operators like myself that should that were here first, obviously. So it really seems to me that the moratorium is a way to stifle the competition, so stifle us, and obviously like bleed us out very slowly, because we need to achieve those economies of scale to stay relevant in this space. And as long as we can't achieve those economies of scale, the more and more we keep on pursuing our objectives, the more, like, the less and less we make revenue out of it. So there's no other way for us to I'm producing a lot of value right now, a part of my mining, because it's the only way for me to keep my mining operation alive. And by the end of the year, if Hydro-Quebec keeps on doing those moratorium, obviously there's no choice for me. I gotta close. And it's the same situation for basically all SMBs here in Quebec that are involved in mining for sure.
So yeah, like just gonna ask you, man, good work you're doing over there about energy consumption research. It's something that we really need. Like I was just before this doing a little bit of searching on that subject, and it's like so much misinformation out there because a lot of people, yeah, they put out that narrative that it's just going to consume the whole world's electricity in a year, and it's just, oh man, we need some good information out there on that. So good work on that, man. But yeah, this whole thing about Bitmain over there doing some of these lobbying efforts, and it just yeah, it just like kind of worries me as far as like this growth. Like just a few months ago, we were talking about how great it is that Quebec's doing this, and the only difference on that moratorium when they switched it over for now, any newcomers coming in pay that 15 cents. Like guys like yourself who are already set up, you're still paying like a rate that you set in before, right? Or did they raise you guys too?
No, no, no. They haven't raised us, but the thing is, to achieve economies of scale, we need to keep on doing our expansions. And the moment I do an expansion, so the moment I use 1 kilowatt more than I use right now, the whole project is gonna be put to the dissuasive rate. So I'm basically stuck at the amount I'm consuming right now. I cannot put any more operation. I cannot plug one more machine. If I do, then I'm gonna have the dissuasive rate applied to all my operation. That is a first. Second, also Régie de l'Énergie, they keep on challenging Hydro-Québec, and there's a lot going on by written. So I've lately, just yesterday, I've sent them a whole letter to answer and try to educate them, because I'm really trying to like I'm trying to have the approach that Hydro-Quebec, they're here to protect the Quebec consumer. What they want is to not have to raise the electricity rate for Quebecers that like has to eat here in winter. Like
Right.
everything is based on electricity here in Quebec, because we have this huge utility that we pull our resources for, at least supposedly. But yeah, so I try to see them as like not necessarily malintentioned, but really I try to educate them, show that the numbers that they've given us and the type of demands they have. First, they haven't verified it, and they admitted to have not verified those demands, so they don't even know if those people are still interested to invest here in Quebec. And that's another thing. Like we did all those campaigns to attract all those miners. Hydro-Quebec did it. We did it also a bit. And uh,
It
what
was effective. It
yeah,
was
yeah, it was
effective.
very effective. But the thing is, there's a lot of speculation in that. So let's say you're a Quebecer, okay, and you have this whole paper mill that hasn't been running for like 50 years now, because the internet has completely fucked your business. So like what you see here is an opportunity. You're saying, okay, well, I'm just besides electricity distribution center. I can just do maybe 15 megawatts or 50 megawatt or 100 megawatt demand, and those Asian people, they're going to buy my building for sure. So I'm going to ask for like to have those 100 megawatts, and it doesn't cost me a thing to ask, and it's first come first serve, so I'm going to have it for sure. So there's all those people that does speculation also, like on their home buildings, because they know that there's a demand for electricity. So
And
yeah, go ahead.
so, and also in this new moratorium, they're saying like they're preferring like mining operations that are a little more established, correct? Like, is that the way the language is set up now?
They are looking to maximize the returns for Quebec again. So there's my understanding is there's various points that they're going to be looking at. Obviously, manufacturing your own chips has been mentioned by them. So obviously, Bitmain has a big advantage over there. But they're also looking for instance, here in Quebec, there's like the climate is cold most of the year, so they're looking for heat reuse cases. So they're looking for mining operations to have some positive externalities on the collectivity. So, for instance, there's some projects up north where the Native Americans they have small villages. They don't have like it's very scarce resources. It's super cold the whole year. So over there, we could just do greenhouses and vegetables over there. It can cost like 10 times the price we have here in Montreal. So it would be very, very, those kind of projects, I believe, could have an advantage over projects that are just maybe throwing the heat away out in the air. That even if it's like using the cold air, like they really want to have positive externalities as well, so they try to promote that as well. But hardware manufacturing has been mentioned as a very positive point for them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like we don't really quite know how, Bitmain is affecting this moratorium or anything like that. But it's just like one of the things, like it's just hard because, yeah, a lot of the press and everything is in French, and it's kind of hard to really cut through. Just similar to the way all these sort of developments happen, we kind of have to get together and figure out what's really going on and everything. And yeah, it's one of these things right here where, I don't know, here in Colorado, we've got a big development and engineering community. And up in Wyoming, there's been a blockchain lobbying effort to put together like a whole, a correct financial system for this whole thing to operate under, where there's been labelings of utility tokens and ICOs and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and it's been pretty well defined. But, there is definitely some language coming out here where they're trying to push legislation, and it's mentioning virtual currencies a lot, and it's like somehow the language is just changing just a little bit, which I think has got to do with like they're trying to do engineering and development here and keep the finances up there. But it's really hard to you don't really see that in the news. It's kind of hard to differentiate what's going on there. But this whole Bitcoin consuming all the world's electricity is an amazing argument for them, because a lot of these people that don't see the value proposition of Bitcoin and they hear that argument, they say, yeah, what are you doing? Just, what are you doing? Like, they don't understand it. So maybe in these remote locations, and it sounds like really we just need a proper application process for this, where maybe when people do come up with their amount estimated megawatt that they're going to be using, like they have to have either the equipment available to show, or like the funding to show that like it's in process of being shipped and it's definitely going to come online. And information like you're working on with the consumption of the electricity and the history of that, and the way that basically just how long it takes to develop this equipment and how it comes online. That education process is going to be essential, and just getting that whole application process shored up. And maybe in the interim, you could just get those guys some food, like the some sort of interest like there, to where they maybe they can't see the value proposition of Bitcoin, but they can see the proposition of like, okay, like it's here, but we're getting more food or more
Exactly.
something. So
Exactly.
I really appreciate the work you're doing up there, and like I really appreciate you coming and helping us understand what's going on up there, because it's it's hard to see through all these weeds.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So,
All right.
Janine, you wanted to kind of jump in with some questions about the energy consumption research he's doing?
Yeah, so I really hope, is my audio terrible right now, or can you hear me? So yeah, like Rick said, I also appreciate that you're doing, you're taking your own look at Bitcoin energy consumption, because the Digiconomist articles that have been coming out over the past year have also plagued me when I'm talking to people about Bitcoin. And there was even one statistic that was like really getting attention on Twitter, where this guy was claiming, based on the Digiconomist article, that 5% of the UK's electricity consumption is being used by Bitcoin, which is completely bogus, as I kind of laid out in a slide that I did for a workshop. But my question for you is, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that people have about energy consumption with mining or Bitcoin in general?
That is a good one. The biggest misconception, well, obviously, like I think people, the biggest problem to me is that people still don't understand, for the most part, the value proposition of Bitcoin. So they don't justify this sacrifice, if you will, of energy. And also, like, I think we never ask those questions for the current things we have right now. So for this project I've been speaking up north, they're also talking about importing bank like servers, and those bank servers we're talking like in hundreds of megawatts. Like the banking system, just like maintaining credit cards, banking, like just the branches themselves, all that stuff, it consumes so much energy. There's no index on that. There's no there are some research on it. There are some research on gold mining. There are some research on oil extraction, but nobody like looks at an index and say, oh well, the banking industry today we're nearing 10,000 megawatts. Nobody does nothing about that. So I think it's just the thing is people see Bitcoin as this thing they don't understand, and they're saying, well, they're consuming all this energy, and like, what's in it for me? Like, we're consuming far more energy for TV, but people see a value in TV. They see value in like entertaining, and they see the value in the news. They see the value in the internet and their computers running all this energy. But with Bitcoin, I think the abstraction is really that they still don't see the value proposition of it, and that might be the biggest like fight we're gonna have to fight.
Because I mean, like, you know, in dealing with like that kind of misconception, like I think a big aspect of that is just a lack of literacy when it comes to economics. You know, like these really hyperbolous statements that like Bitcoin is going to grow to consume all the world's energy. Like it's only going to grow to the point that it's profitable, or maybe in excess of that, to the point where somebody with a longer time horizon will see a profit like beyond that short-term lack of profitability. And I mean, at the end of the day, like there are so many things in the world that consume electricity that generate a profit. Like it's not, Bitcoin isn't just going to push everything out to the point where nothing else is being done. Like there will still be profit in producing electronics, in heating homes. And like eventually, like, you know, unless Bitcoin's price continues going up literally forever, which it won't, like that will find an equilibrium. And then that equilibrium will not only kind of hold that in check, but it'll also add more long-term security. Because then in attempting to divert power to Bitcoin mining, like say, for instance, to attack the network, you're not just taking unused power anymore. You would actually have to divert power from other things that are necessary for the functioning of society. And that's going to be a lot harder than just getting your hand on like excess power from things like hydroelectric dams.
Correct, and also, like I mean, if Bitcoin can grow indefinitely, well, so does the energy production, especially at times where the renewable looks like more and more, they are more and more attractive, more and more efficient. So solar power is not interesting here in Quebec because we got those big, huge hydro dams and those big, huge surpluses. But let's say that we use them all. Well, at this point, doing solar power would become interesting. It wouldn't be interesting necessarily for mining because of the peaks and because of the like you need to consume like basically 24/7. But let's say for your house or for your TV and all that stuff. So like there's no cap on the energy production. If we need more energy, we're just gonna produce more, and we should want to produce more because civilization and the progress that has been done has all been done in places where energy is abundant. So we should look to have like abundance of energy. Like abundance of energy is basically what you need to have a good civilization. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you know, one other thing I kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit and talk about. This was one of the documents in French, so I really wasn't able to make too much sense of it. But I saw something about a tiering of prices potentially for like different net consumption levels. Like, are they pretty much looking at like charging more for people who consume less in net, or like a tiered system like that?
Actually, there's already a tiered system, so that is how the province work, and they do that because it costs far less energy, far less money to send all this energy to the same place than to 1,000 or 100,000 houses. So like there's they save energy because here in Quebec the thing is not like it's very cheap to produce this energy. It's to transport this energy that costs a lot. But with mining operations or whatever intensive like industry, like for instance the we say aluminium in French. I can't recall right now. Aluminium in English too. So those industries they are very energy intensive, and like they just go where the power is, and there's not so much distribution. And if there's to be some networks to be installed, well, it costs far less than to do a network that's going to provide a whole city. So there's already this kind of tired system, and that's not going to change. What they want to do now is they want to like do this block of 500 megawatts and say, okay, well, all those type of clients, and that is a first because, and even last year, Hydro-Quebec said they didn't want to do prices per categories. They really want to do the prices per tire that you mentioned. So the number of kilowatts or megawatts you're consuming will influence the rate you get. But right now, what they're proposing is saying, okay, well, everything that is blockchain related or mining related, cryptocurrency related, we put this in this 500 megawatt block, and you got to compete each one another, and like this is not going to affect any other rates. It's really just this 500 megawatt block that's going to compete against itself.
And so that especially is like yet another dynamic that's really kind of disadvantaging like native Quebecers. Like you guys are stuck
100%.
and can't really keep up with the difficulty increasing to smooth out your profitability, and then like that would further like yeah, like I mean it really does seem like this whole thing is just structured to bleed out people now and just clean out the market for new players to come in at larger scale.
That is correct. It seems to me that it's there to bleed out all the SMBs. Like like I've mentioned, all the SMBs are in my position right now. I'm speaking with a lot of them, and like we're still profitable because we still have those rates because we're not doing more demands. But as long as we can't do those new demands, we can't achieve economies of scale. And like, I mean, in the meantime, big players like Bitmain or Bitfury or Hot8 or whatever, everywhere in the world, they're still like taking all this place and still achieving better economies of scale. So it's very a big it's a big disadvantage for us Quebecers now to compete in this market when like maybe 6 months ago it was one of the best places in the world and most stable places in the world to mine. So it's very saddening to me.
And I think we got a question from one of the viewers. Ginny, if you want to read that off.
Yeah, the question was: is there a point at which it would be feasible at a if the Bitcoin price fell lower, would it be feasible to have miners running only during non-peak hours at the lower rates? Is there a significant technical problem for them having to turn off miners part of the day? Does that like affect profitability?
Well, obviously it does affect profitability because you won't be mining maybe 30% of your day. But let's say that let's say miners are ready to agree with that, and they're ready to. So, for instance, you have the winter peaks here in Quebec. Miners are ready to disconnect during those peaks, and normally what Hydro-Quebec does for that is they reward you with a better rate. Now they don't want to do that with us, obviously, and we still are like willing to do it. Like we're still waiting to take this loss. It's going to be a loss, but we're willing to take this loss to still connect to the grid because we believe in renewable energy. Like it's a good rate. We have somewhat a good political climate over here. But right now it's all going to shit to me.
Sorry guys, I keep having some network trouble. I'm dropping in and out. Let me just kind of see if I can get this question out before that happens again. Like like we were discussing earlier about like people just don't understand the value proposition of Bitcoin, and it's hard to get people to like incentivize to like allow this to go on and like figure out a way to get it to do basically this whole different way of doing business, in like this decentralized manner and trying to avoid this centralized stuff. And it's one of these things where I'm curious up there in Quebec, like how much like y'all are doing, like you're doing this research on energy consumption, but is there like any, like a creation like the How Long miners over there in China, like people working on mining designs to make things more efficient and like renewable energies more efficient, like those sort of things to just sort of show like that, yeah, like Bitcoin is working to be more efficient and like, the idea of like, securing a store of value and a hedge against, the current financial. A lot of people, they don't see that, and they kind of don't even care or something until it's a big problem. So, like I think like maybe there's education on the ground stuff like meetups like y'all are doing. Like it's a big important thing. But if there's something we could point to and say like, yeah, but this development's going on, and in renewables to try and make more efficient solar cells or turbines, anything like that going on there in Quebec too, as far as research and education?
Yeah, in regards to the research and hardware, there was this company, Orion Miner, that came to our second meetup that we organized, the second Quebec mining meetup that we organized. It was in February, I believe, and they did this presentation about their new designs and how they design ASICs. I believe that John Brains from Slushpool has even maybe reviewed or at least seen the design, and like you mentioned, it looked great. Obviously, I don't know like if the product is gonna be like it's a bit the same question that we all had with Along Mining. Like it looks very awesome. There's all those. There's a lot of trusted people that maybe have reviewed it and all that stuff. But obviously, until we get a machine in our hands, we can't know for sure if it's gonna be if the delivery is gonna be good, if they're gonna be good on their word. But apparently, it would be one of the most efficient miner right now. So that would obviously alleviate or at least it would lower the consumption, and it will also be like a big competition edge against huge Asian producers like Bitmain.
Like, yeah, we saw with GMO, like they got a lot of customer feedback, I guess, about this idea of like mining only at peak hours, like that question, because they actually created some software to implement where it would actually automatically do that. And yeah, is there like any kind of developments like that going on within the mining community to try and figure out like new ways to do mining to where it is like that, like when y'all like y'all get those how long's in they're like open source, so you imagine y'all are working with it and all that to try and help develop that as well. But like how small or big is this community? Like, is it a real small group of people, or is it like kind of like a buzz stream there where people know like if they get into mining they can make some money? Like how big is it?
In Quebec, like I mean, a lot of people are involved, and like it's a very huge community in Quebec, especially because of that. I think the mining in Quebec has very, in some sense, has very subsidized the involvement in Bitcoin because since people could make a lot of money by mining in Quebec, even at your home with just one or two GPU rig mining maybe Ethereum or whatever, it subsidized those people to start learning about Bitcoin. And we've seen Francis Pouliot lately just tweeted that Canadian apparently we would have like 5% of all the Canadians, so it's around like 1.85 million people that are holders of Bitcoin here. So that is a big rate for the current state of like if we look at the whole world. And there's a second study that even confirmed that, a second study made by another group, so that looks very awesome. And I really strongly believe that it's because of the cheap energy we have here in Canada in general, but especially in Quebec, that really subsidized this knowledge, if you will. Also, in regards to efficiency and like other solutions, maybe to what we call the délestage. So délestage is what allows you to unconnect for the peak hours and then reconnect. There's also some kind of batteries, and I believe Hydro-Quebec are involved in the development of those batteries. Those super batteries would be like a way to like basically you would fill your battery tank with the energy when there's no peaks, so maybe in the summer or whatever, and then you get to the winter, and whenever you have to do this delastage, then you connect to your battery and still mine anyways. So there are some developments that are being done, and I believe Hydro-Quebec are involved in those developments, but that's nothing, from my understanding, that's nothing that's going to be or hit the market in the next like 5 years. It's not consumer ready.
Okay, so like I know Hydro-Quebec is like a government entity. Like, do y'all vote in and out of those people, or are those people that are put in place from y'all's elected officials that
Yeah,
run those contracts?
I believe they're like they're not put in place by the elected officials. They're I would need to get more information to be very accurate on that subject. Actually, I don't want to do any misinformation. So I'm not sure enough of the process of like who's getting where, how it's going over there. But like one sure thing is Hydro-Québec like is this public utility obviously, and for sure like there was in Quebec there was some corruption. For instance, you can look at Hydro-Quebec with it's one of the largest like contractor for construction, and there was a lot of corruption in Quebec with construction. There was like this big public commission that we call the LUPAC that seen there was a lot of contracts at Hydro-Quebec that were basically like they were doing nothing. So some employees, they were paid like 1 year, 2 year to do some construction project, and they just like they took the money and hired some other group to do the project for themselves. So like there's a lot of corruption going on in Hydro-Quebec for sure. And like I mean, the UPAC commission was to remove corruption from the PLQ government as well. So it's all, to me, it's all linked together.
It's just like I don't know. It just seems like it's like Bitmain kind of pushes us toward these like I don't know. Just the idea of centralization. It always pushes us towards these like answers we got to find. And like last year it was UASF and everything. And like right now with the price rise and people like their eyes bigger than their stomachs and they're trying to figure out how can they get their piece of the pie. It's like we're really having to take on the ground efforts. And yeah, like I was just saying before, it's like I really applaud your efforts there to come up with good information and educate the people there, because like you're saying, it's a large group there might actually have to come to a political fight where maybe if this thing does get to be too corrupt or centralized to where somebody's going to have to kind of be like put under political pressure to say like, look, this guy's doing this thing which is bad for business, like I'm leaving because of this, and like so will the rest of this very important revolutionary technology. So if we don't get those right guys making the right decisions there, this is a problem, and we're going to see it in our economy. So enjoy your cheap energy, but there won't be business here to help develop it. So really applaud your effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got another question from the chat. I'm going to massage it a little bit, but you mentioned earlier about like looking for ways to like reuse heat in like ancillary operations, and he was kind of asking if like there are any policies or maybe talk of policies for like individual miners at home, maybe to get access to like cheaper or like closer to industrial power rates, like potentially if they could find like small scale ways to reuse heat in other ways to generate economic activity.
Well, I just mining in Quebec in your home. So like that's how I eat my home like the 2 last years, obviously. So for sure, there's a big reuse by home mining, and there's a lot of Quebecers that are doing home mining. So that is a good thing, and that's a good thing for prevention of the 51% attack. But like maybe you have like all those citizens and altogether they do like 5, 10, or 15 megawatts. That's nothing compared to the hundreds of megawatts that are demanded to Hydro-Quebec right now by whatever party it is. But but I still think that anyways with UASF, you've mentioned UASF just before. Well, UASF, we've seen with that there's not only the ash power, there's also like the economic nodes and like all the economic majority that has a say in like anyways we won't approve a block that is invalid, right? So and a 50% 51% attack anyways would require the attacker to like do a fake like a double spend on its own. So like there's a lot of complexity in this subject, and I'm not so scared that it's gonna turn out bad, because also there's a lot of development. So we mentioned the GMO miner just before, but there's also Canon that have raised an IPO like a bit earlier this year to release a new 7 nanometer miner. And I believe that Bitmain's 10 nanometer batch has been a failure, so they have to do a new mask, and that takes about 6 months. So whatever how powerful they are right now, that doesn't mean they're going to stay that relevant in the space in the future, because there's a lot of money to be made in the space, and it can be made with, yes, obviously access to cheap energy, but also with the hardware manufacturing. If you have any better like chips schematics or and Orion Mining right now, it's in Montreal. These guys are Montrealers that studied to Concordia University, and like they went to Taiwan and like do this big project. To me, it's really reassuring when I think about the 51% attack, and I always try to get back to the like there's a lot of point of like, if you will, a failure in the mining. So there's like the hardware distribution monopoly. There could be the pool monopoly. So we can see that right now there's a lot of pool concentration that we would prefer to like be a bit smaller, obviously. And for that, there's some proposals. So for instance, there's the Blue Mats that made the proposal for Better Ash, I believe. So I think there's a lot of attack surfaces, but I think there's a lot of people working on each of those attack surfaces. So I'm not so scared about the 51% attack scenario, but obviously, like, I mean, giants like Bitmain, they're gonna do everything they can to stifle competition and take their place. And uh, even if they wouldn't want to do an attack, like obviously they like everybody's gonna try to get the max they can, the max amount of hash rate they can. So uh, like I can't blame them for trying, but I don't think they will succeed.
Okay, and we've got one more viewer question before Janine has one. And just to preface, I'm probably going to tack a little something on the end of Janine's question. But Roy Scherf in the chat is wondering about like any specific ideas about reusing heat runoff, aside from greenhouses, which I've seen have kind of been catching on lately.
Yeah, well, it's like obviously it there's not like there's a lot of uses, but like I mean with mining there's so much heat that and there's also the heat transportation. So like you won't for instance I've thought about a car wash. For instance, you could like eat like you could dry the cars with mining maybe, but again, would that really make sense? Like there's a lot of things that has to be to be studied. But one thing I like to imagine about the future is maybe one day, like your dryer, your air dryer, your uh, anything that has to do with heat. They're like what I mean is we're gonna see it the other way around. We're not gonna say, okay, what can I do for Bitcoin mining to be efficient and reuse the heat? We're gonna say, what can I do for my heat to produce Bitcoins? That's the way I like to think about it, and I really believe that as Bitcoin gets monetized, it could really turn out that way. And so you can imagine like big giants like Samsung that basically done the chips for the Elon mining. They could have like those big Samsung like dryers, and you can have your air dryer, all that stuff. So really, to me, it's like look at the other way around. It's what can you do for your heat to generate Bitcoins?
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I like that.
So you want to toss your question in, Jeannie?
Yeah, on the topic of Bitmain and that kind of subject. Yes, on the end of yesterday's show, we were talking about how Bitmain had apparently given some money to the Opera browser to then add a cryptocurrency wallet, and how we suspected that they might be moving some of their business model to actually collecting data on users, because they mentioned using AI. And we saw a similar thing happen a few months ago with Bitfury, where they're releasing this crystal thing that I believe is a competitor or will be used with chain analytics. And they're like very clearly saying like this is going to be used for surveillance. And so I just thought it was interesting that like two big mining companies, they're kind of shifting some of their focus onto building surveillance tools. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if maybe they, at being miners, they have some kind of skill set in that, or it's just because they have so much access to capital that they think that's the most effective way to use it. So I would be curious to know what your thoughts on that are.
Well, obviously, it's really speculative. I have no idea why they would do it. I would assume that is really because they have like the capex required to develop those kind of softwares and maybe hardware. Maybe it's because they have like so mining like the fresh mined coins are like seen as first as a fungibility problem, because like they're like maybe clean coins, if you will. But there's also some people that like have the claim that they're not so clean, because there's also the transaction fees that are involved in the block. So there's transaction fees that are included in the block with the Coinbase, and those transaction fees they might have been tainted in the past. So how can you know that your block is tainted or not? But really, I have no clue for why they are doing it, but maybe just throwing out those ideas if like it ever like rings a bell. But really, no idea. I believe they just have the capex and they want to make money, so that's what they do.
I mean, that would make sense, but like my big worry is that this is kind of moves towards like attempting to undermine fungibility proactively, and potentially even down the road attempt to start instituting, like maybe as a service, things like blacklists. Because I mean, like, to go into the opera thing a little more, like Bitmain's investing in their IPO, and they pretty much the business is the browser, and then they spun off another company that deals with the ad services that used to be under the same umbrella. But the browser company Opera, like it's integrating a cryptocurrency wallet directly into the browser, and they're also working on a news service that would effectively be using deep learning to kind of tailor news to individual users. And like, from my perspective, like seeing Bitmain get involved in that, I'm looking at that and their Sophon deep learning ASIC line, and I'm kind of seeing like these pieces kind of come together, where like the browser is collecting data about your just browsing habits, the information you're exposed to, and what that tells you about somebody's personality or interest. Like a wallet built into that browser kind of correlates and connects all of your financial activity through cryptocurrency with that. And then in the end, it would be kind of parsing through that data, potentially using Bitmain's Sophon ASICs in the long term. And to me, like seeing like the way Bitmain is throwing their money around in these three things and the way they kind of synergize together, I mean, that screams to me that it's being intentionally orchestrated as a surveillance system. And to what end? Like, I can't imagine anything that really kind of synergizes like in a deep way, except potentially, censorship or attempting to institute blacklists or proactively undermine fungibility.
Yeah, I totally hear you, and makes a lot of sense. Obviously, like I think we're all in the space to avoid that, and we're going to be fighting that. But like it makes a lot of sense that corporations like Bitmain are going to be trying to stifle innovation, and like there's a lot of money to be made on blacklists. There's a lot of money to be made on censorship, and obviously some actors are going to try to censor us. So for sure, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, this whole Bitmain speculation thing, like I was just looking into it before. It's like, yeah, they've invested in Open Bazaar. They've opened a Russian repair center, a branch in Switzerland that they say will play a central role in their global expansion. And they concealed their incorporation in Washington whenever they were going to.
Oh, there goes the connection. But I mean, still here? All right. You want to finish what you were saying, Rick?
Oh yeah, man. So yeah, I was just saying, like, and with Amply last year, we know that there's just like some intentions where we don't exactly know, but this expansion and everything, it does kind of go, fly in the face of what we're trying to do here. But like you were saying earlier, with like the future possibilities and efficiencies found, and just like people coming to understand the value proposition better, I think we might solve that where a lot of people are using miners day to day in their home, and kind of comes together for a community pool for that local region. And like you were saying with better hash, all that stuff. It's hopefully we can counter this. It's like Bitmain is the thing pushing us forward towards where we can finally figure out a way to keep this thing decentralized and robust. So yeah, just like going to say that, yeah, that speculation it's not unwarranted.
Yeah, like Bcash, it turned out to be a great thing in the end because we all learned from it. Like we were all so scared. At least I speak for myself. I was so scared about that fork. But since like Bcash fork now, like there can be thousands of forks. I don't even care anymore. Like I really think all those attack vectors, like they're going to be strengthening us in the end.
Yeah, right on. I'm with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like we saw initially those huge swings back and forth in the hash rate, and now when we look at the charts, it's like the Bcash is almost a flat line, and Bitcoin hash rate continues climbing.
Correct.
Yeah, and this unknown hash rate is jumping up big. A lot of these new miners coming on.
Yeah, correct. And like what you mentioned with Bleed, like that supports the argument that there needs to be like this decentralization on all those kind of layers in mining. So there's the mining pools that needs to be decentralized. There's the geographic that needs to be decentralized. So the hashers needs to be spread apart everywhere. There's the mining gear itself needs to be decentralized. Like if we all rely on the same hardware, they can, even if it's not like intended to be used against us, there can be a bug in those hardware, and those hardware could like just like kill half of the hash rate like from one instant. So to me, these are all very important issues. And as we advance in time, I believe hashers like me or mining pools and all those other entities are going to have to like, or the I would say the interests are going to align towards that.
Yeah, sorry. Did you have something to say, Jenny?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the question I had, where you mentioned someone was actually researching Coinbase transactions being tainted, and that was, I believe, the Samurai devs mentioned that. If you want to show the tweet, yeah. And they mentioned Boltzmann. I'm not sure if that's it sounds like a research group to me, but if you go to the original thread that was quoted there, I believe, yeah, they say Boltzmann. So yeah, I made this joke about how, no UTXO is without taint, like no man is without sin. So yeah, that would definitely be interesting to see. I haven't checked for updates on this. I don't know if maybe they've released something new about that, but that would be interesting to see how much information can be gleaned from tainted Coinbase transactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Boltzmann is the metric to establish linkability between different inputs in a transaction, if I remember correctly. It's what they use to create the Stonewall protocol to try to like mimic coin join with individual transactions.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we're getting up close to the hour mark. I know I didn't ask you like how much time you had for this today, but I mean, if there's any more questions from anybody, or you've got anything you kind of want to say, I think me at least, I'm kind of plumbed out of stuff I wanted to bring up and ask you.
Well, definitely. If anybody has any question on the chat, maybe I'm here to reply.
And just while the chat's sort of coming together to figure out a question, like we're just saying about all this stuff that we're working on, it's really incredible stuff. I mean, like I think there will be like that moment where we can kind of get like a group of community people together, like at least these regions where they understand the value proposition, and we can come up with an answer to this, because yeah, it's kind of like the same problems that plague other systems are definitely just making their way in, and like they're already here. So I think in time we're going to find answers to them. It's just one of those things that takes time, because it's like until we see the problem, we don't know the answer. And like you were saying with Bcash, it's that Bitcoin Cash. It's like one of those things where once it happens, you feel a lot more, like, okay, I think we can figure out an answer to this, and this is the answer. Or it's just one of those things that's slow going. But yeah, I think it's discussions like these where we could come together. It really is the thing that's building that robustness and that censorship resistance. So yeah, just like keep reiterating this, like just like, yeah, applaud your efforts and like everything that is going on. And that's why I love this space and everything we're doing. It really does feel like we're on the ground floor of this of all this stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, and I'm sure you're in, as much as it's kind of like pressuring you around, it's like one of those things that you're passionate about. It's kind of like a fun puzzle. So yeah, appreciate everything you're doing, coming on and everything.
All right, we got one joke question from the chat and one serious question. Joke question: when moon? Serious question: in your opinion, what's more centralized, Bitcoin mining or Bitcoin ownership?
Well, that would be hard, but I would assume that would be Bitcoin mining. And for the wind moon, I believe like we are mooning. There's a drop right now that, like, if you look short term in the 6 months, yeah, obviously we've dropped, but Bitcoin is mooning. It's been mooning for 9 years now.
Good answer.
Mm-hmm. So I guess pretty much wraps it up. I really appreciate your time coming on, Johnathan.
Thanks for receiving me.
It's kind of hard as an English speaker to really keep up with everything in Quebec with, the bilingual nature of news information. But, everybody who's watching, Johnathan is definitely a person to keep your eye on in terms of accurate, well-sourced information in the mining ecosystem. His Twitter account is actually in the show notes description in YouTube. I highly recommend everybody follow him and keep an eye on everything he has to say. And thank you for joining us, Johnathan.
It's a pleasure. See you guys.
All right. Take care, everybody.